Have you ever witnessed the moment when someone falls from the pinnacle of power into the depths of despair? Not within the pages of a thick novel or on the silver screen with meticulously crafted plot twists, but right in the glaring spotlight of national television, where every word and every raised eyebrow draws the attention of millions. The $800 million lawsuit between Karoline Leavitt and The View isn't just a dry legal dispute filled with staggering figures and convoluted jargon. It's a living tragedy where pride, prejudice, and moral choices collide with ferocious intensity, leaving wounds that won't easily heal. This is a story about women who once stood atop a pedestal, convinced they could shape the world with their laughter and sharp tongues, only to realize that those very things might turn around and devour them. And I'm here to take you deep into this tale, not just to recount what happened, but to pose a question that will make you pause and reflect. When you laugh at someone else, do you ever imagine that one day you might have to kneel and beg for their forgiveness? Picture a room ablaze with studio lights, where the women of The View sit around a round table with unshakable confidence. Their laughter rings out like a familiar soundtrack, sharp and commanding, as news of Karoline Leavitt's $800 million lawsuit first breaks. It's a morning like any other, with light streaming through large glass panels, reflecting off their faces. These are the opinion shapers, unafraid to speak their minds before millions of viewers. When Karoline Leavitt's name comes up, tied to accusations of defamation and workplace misconduct against them and the ABC network, not one of them blinks. One of them, with a mocking smile, calls it a cheap act by someone who doesn't know her place. Another shrugs, her tone light but dripping with disdain, as if they've weathered storms far worse 1,000 times over, and this is nothing to fuss about. A third, with the assurance of someone who stood in tense courtrooms, declares the lawsuit a rickety boat, too flimsy to ride the waves and destined to sink beneath the sea of oblivion. They laugh loudly, not out of joy, but because they believe themselves untouchable. And in that moment, it seems the world laughs with them. Major news outlets quickly pile on, labeling the lawsuit frivolous and a desperate bid for attention. But while their laughter still echoes across the airwaves, a cold wind begins to creep through the shadowy corridors of ABC's headquarters. Behind the stage lights, men and women in stern suits aren't laughing. They don't shrug or scoff. They sit around long tables, flipping through page after page of documents Karoline Leavitt has submitted to the court, papers not just filled with accusations, but backed by meticulously recorded evidence, witness testimonies, and an argument as sharp as a blade, capable of slicing through any defense. This isn't the joke the hosts think it is. This is a bomb, planted right at the heart of the media empire they've built over years, ticking down to detonation. ABC's lawyers don't take long to realize that if this explodes in court, it won't just shake The View. It could drag the entire network into an abyss, exposing secret emails, shady backstage decisions, and conversations they pray never see the light of day. Just weeks later, the air in the studio shifts entirely. The laughter dies out, as if someone abruptly unplugged a blaring speaker. The women who once sat upright, staring confidently into the cameras, now appear with wavering eyes, forced smiles, unable to mask their unease. On air, they stop mocking Karoline Leavitt. Instead, one of them shakes her head, her voice slow, as if holding back a wave of emotion. I think we all need to take a step back. There's too much unnecessary tension here. Another, the one who laughed the loudest, now speaks with hesitation. Why does this have to go so far? Can't we just sit down and talk? And the third, who once proclaimed the lawsuit baseless, leans forward, looking straight into the camera with a tone bordering on pleading. Karoline, if you're watching, I think we can resolve this without dragging it to court. It's a moment no one saw coming, a complete reversal, from sky-high arrogance to blatant begging, broadcast live for the world to see. But the audience isn't so easily fooled. They've watched The View long enough to know this shift isn't sudden sincerity, it's fear. Social media erupts like a volcano, comments flood in. If they did nothing wrong, why are they begging like this? How funny that they mocked her and now they're shaking in their boots. Memes spread like wildfire. One side showing them laughing heartily weeks ago, the other capturing them now, faces taut, scrambling to salvage what dignity remains. The public isn't just skeptical, they're angry, they're mocking, and they demand answers. Meanwhile, at ABC, the atmosphere grows suffocating. Ratings plummet, major advertisers quietly pull back, and the dread of an impending trial where every secret could be laid bare plunges the executives into full-blown crisis mode. From resounding laughter to desperate pleas, this story is an irresistible spiral of arrogance and consequence. It began as a game they thought they'd always win, but now the board has flipped, and they're no longer the ones moving the pieces. Karoline Leavitt, once dismissed by them, now stands at the center, holding the power to decide their fate. And as the studio lights dim, a question lingers in the air. How could they fall from the heights so fast? What turned these untouchable women into trembling shadows, begging mercy from the very person they once laughed at? This isn't just a lawsuit, it's a modern tragedy, leading us to turns no one can predict. The studio no longer shines as it once did. The lights still glow, but a faint, invisible haze seems to settle over everything. The air thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves whisper of an impending collapse. The women of The View, who once mocked Karoline Leavitt with unshakable confidence, now sit there, their voices trembling, their gazes shifting like animals caught in the very trap they set. Her $800 million lawsuit has transformed them from opinion leaders into prisoners of a narrative they thought they controlled. But what really happened in those weeks when the laughter faded and panic seeped into every breath? This isn't just a tale of a lawsuit or a TV show's downfall. It's a mirror reflecting deeper conflicts about power, prejudice, and the cost of forgetting that justice isn't something to be doled out at whim. Rewind to that first moment when Karoline Leavitt's name flashed across the studio's big screen. They didn't see her as an equal rival. No, to them, she was a faint silhouette, a stranger from a worldview they'd long scorned. One of them sneered, her tone like she was telling a joke. Who does she think she is, suing us? This is just a stunt for attention. Another shrugged, as if Karoline's existence wasn't worth a second thought, and the third, with the swagger of someone used to standing on a pedestal, insisted the lawsuit would vanish like smoke in the wind, unreal, unthreatening, but beneath those words something deeper was at play. They weren't just laughing at the lawsuit, they were laughing at her, turning her into a symbol of everything they despised, a conservative, an outsider not part of their right side. In that moment, they unwittingly revealed a bitter truth. The power they wielded, the power to shape narratives before millions, wasn't always wielded for justice. Consider this, The View has long seen itself as a beacon of fairness. These are women who fought for their voices in a world that didn't welcome them, people of color, people who rose from hardship, people once pushed to the margins. They speak for the oppressed, champion progressive values, and fearlessly call out those who defy their ideals. But when faced with Karoline Leavitt, they did what they'd once condemned. They discriminated. Not by openly rejecting her, but by belittling her, pinning her with prejudices they deemed she deserved. She's just a conservative playing the victim, they said, as if that alone stripped her of the right to be heard. But what if Karoline weren't a conservative? What if she were a woman of color fighting for her rights, or a minority seeking justice? Would they have laughed then? I doubt it. I suspect they'd have sat down, listened, maybe even raised their voices to defend her. So what made Karoline different in their eyes? Not her actions, not her lawsuit, but who she was, or rather, who they assumed she represented. This is where the story turns dramatic, because their arrogance wasn't just a fleeting misstep. It was a crack in the very foundation they'd built. They believed their power, forged through decades of struggle and triumph, gave them the right to decide who deserved respect and who didn't. They believed their voices were truth, that their audience would always back them, that their mockery was harmless because they were right. But when Karoline Leavitt refused to back down, when ABC's legal team began to panic under the weight of her case, they were forced to face a harsh reality. Power doesn't mean immunity. Their words, the jokes, the eye rolls, the sarcasm, didn't vanish like smoke. They left traces. And now those traces were turning back to stab them, sharper than any blade they'd ever wielded. Picture the scene. These once invincible women now sit in the studio with hollow stares, their voices quaking as they try to retract what they've said. One calls for a step back, but her tone is no longer that of a leader. It's that of someone begging for an escape. Another suggests talking like dadults, but the hesitation in her voice is like a stifled sob from someone who knows they've gone too far. And the third, who once declared the lawsuit groundless, now gazes into the camera, all but pleading for Karoline's mercy. It's not sincerity, it's fear. Fear that everything they've built could crumble just because they were too confident, too certain they couldn't be wrong. This story isn't just about them or Karoline, it's about all of us. It's about how we wield our power, whether it's the power of a TV host or just a small voice in daily life. Do we ever ask ourselves if we're being fair or just guarding our own side? Do we ever pause to consider that our seemingly harmless words could become the fire that burns us down? For The View, their arrogance led them to the brink, from shaping public opinion to pleading for leniency. And as the studio lights fade, as the audience's applause turns to distant murmurs, the question lingers: can they rise from these ashes, or have they dug their own grave with prejudices they'd never admit? This isn't the end, it's just the start of a bigger storm, and we've yet to see its full devastation. The studio is no longer a silent arena, it's an invisible battlefield, where the lights no longer blaze brilliantly but cast strained faces and elongated shadows that seem to recount a tale of vanished arrogance. The women of The View, who once mocked Karoline Leavitt with unshakable confidence, now sit there, their voices trembling, their eyes darting like beasts ensnared in their own trap. She's not just an enemy or a victim, she's a force that has rattled an entire media empire. Imagine Karoline Leavitt at the moment she decided to file her $800 million lawsuit against The View and ABC. It wasn't an ordinary day, not a choice made in a fleeting burst of anger. I envision her in a quiet room, perhaps a small office with stacks of papers cluttering the desk, the glow of a desk lamp illuminating her youthful yet resolute face. Before her lie documents, proof of defamation, words that turned her into a punchline on national TV, and actions she believes crossed the line of fairness. To The View, she was just a name to ridicule, a conservative unworthy of their respect. But to Karoline, this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a declaration of war, a statement that she wouldn't let others define her with their laughter. And as she signed the papers, I imagine a moment of charged silence, like the ticking of a clock before a bomb goes off, signaling that everything was about to change forever. In the eyes of The View's women, Karoline is a threat, an outsider, a young upstart daring to challenge their authority. They don't see her as an individual with her own story, but as a symbol of everything they oppose, a conservative, someone not on their right side. But look closer, beyond the shell they've pinned on her, and you'll see something different. I'm not here to defend Karoline's politics. I don't know enough about her to do that, and that's not the point. What I see is a woman fighting to be recognized in a hostile environment, where her voice is drowned out by laughter and contempt. The $800 million lawsuit isn't just about money. It's about honor, about the right to stand up and say, "You can't treat me like this," and expect me to stay silent. It's an act of defiance, a scream amid the storm, and whether you agree with her or not, you have to admit, she's made the once untouchable tremble. Think of that moment on air when one of them leaned forward, stared into the camera and said, "Karoline, if you're watching, I believe we can settle this without going to court." It wasn't an offer of peace. It was a plea, an admission that Karoline was no longer just a name to mock. She'd become a force, a presence they couldn't ignore. And in that shift, I see a bigger story about the power of one against the many. Karoline doesn't have millions of viewers behind her, no stage lights or a massive production team. She has only herself and the resolve to stand against a giant machine. It makes me wonder, is she really the enemy The View thinks she is? Or is she a... There's a dramatic moment I can't help but imagine, when ABC's legal team opens Karoline's documents, their eyes widening in shock, sweat beating on their foreheads as they realize this is no joke. The words The View once tossed out carelessly, jokes, sarcasm, now documented, proven, and poised to become weapons against them. Karoline didn't just toss a pebble into a pond, she hurled an iceberg, and the ripples are spreading, threatening to sink everything. In that instant, she's no longer a young woman they laughed at. She's the one wielding the sword of justice, and its edge is sharper than anything The View has ever faced. But Karoline's story isn't just about strength or revenge. It's also about pain. The pain of being turned into a joke, sidelined because you don't fit the mold. I imagine the nights she lay awake, replaying their mockery in her mind, wondering if she had the strength to keep going. And in that vulnerability, I see a rare courage, the courage to stand up, to face powerful women who thought they could crush her with a smile. She's not doing this for fame or fortune. She's doing it because she believes she deserves to be heard, seen, and respected. So, who is Karoline Leavitt? To The View, she's the enemy, a threat that could destroy their legacy. To me, she's a symbol of defiance, a young woman daring to challenge a system 1,000 times her size. And perhaps, deep down, she's also a victim of a world where a voice is only heard if it fits the story others want to tell. As the studio lights dim, as the View's pleas ring out faintly, Karoline stands firm, unwavering. She's made them tremble, and in that trembling, she's proven something. Sometimes a single voice is enough to shake an empire, but her story isn't over. It's leading us to new crossroads where the truth will keep unfolding and we'll see who truly survives. The studio is no longer a silent arena. It's an invisible battlefield where cracks don't just show on the faces of The View's women, but in the very bond between them and ABC. Imagine The View as a family, not the polished kind in staged photos, but a real one, forged through time, arguments, and shared victories. One of them, with resilience and seasoned experience, is like the mother who's guided the group through storms of scandal, standing firm even when the world turned its back. Another, blunt and unafraid of confrontation, is the big sister, ready to dive into any fight to defend what they believe. And the third, with sharp intellect and calm, is the rational youngest, offering clarity amid chaos. Together they've weathered everything: public criticism, internal turbulence, moments when the world seemed poised to tear them apart. The View isn't just a show, it's their home, their legacy, proof they could stand tall in a brutal industry not made for the weak. But when Karoline Leavitt entered, wielding her $800 million lawsuit like a razor-sharp sword, everything changed. At first they united in laughter. That resounding laughter, as we've seen, was their shield against her threat. They believed that by holding the line, by keeping up the sarcasm and dismissal, nothing could touch them. But when ABC's legal team began poring over Karoline's documents, when lawyers in black suits huddled around conference tables with pale faces and hushed, anxious voices, a small fissure appeared. Then came the fateful moment. They learned ABC, the home they'd poured their careers into building, was considering negotiating with Karoline behind their backs. It wasn't just a legal move, it was a dagger through the heart of this family. Picture the dramatic scene, a closed-door meeting, doors shut tight, dim light filtering through drawn blinds. The woman who'd been their rock, with silver hair and a steely gaze, leaps from her chair, her voice thundering. "Are you seriously taking her seriously? After everything we've done?" Her anger isn't just aimed at Karoline, it's at the network, at the people she once trusted like family. She's survived countless scandals, kept this show alive through every tempest, and now she feels betrayed by those who once stood behind her. The fiery big sister storms out of the meeting, her footsteps echoing sharply on the wooden floor, followed by a loud crash as she slams something onto a dressing table in rage. "We made the money, we built this, and now they're selling us out over some stupid lawsuit," she roars, her voice breaking with fury. And the youngest, usually the calmest, sits silently, hands clasped tight, eyes downcast, as if trying to suppress the growing fear inside. With her legal background, she knows better than anyone that this lawsuit isn't a joke. If it goes to trial, they could all be dragged in, and everything they've said or done could be exposed under the cold light of justice. This isn't just a career crisis, it's a personal fracture, a profound loss of trust. They'd always believed ABC was their fortress, that even if the world turned away, they had each other and the network at their backs. But when ABC started talks with Karoline, when the executives in those closed meetings put the network's interests above loyalty to them, this family shattered. The mother feels abandoned, the big sister betrayed, and the youngest realizes nothing is untouchable anymore. They're not just fighting Karoline, they're fighting each other, their fears, their anger, and the questions they dare not voice. Who can we trust? What's left when this is over? Imagine them stepping out of that meeting, their eyes no longer meeting as they once did. The laughter that once bound them is now a distant memory, replaced by a heavy silence, like rain falling on an abandoned house. They built the view with sweat, tears, and the belief they were a team, a family nothing could break. But when Karoline Leavitt stepped in, she didn't just challenge their public power. She unknowingly exposed the cracks they'd hidden. And as they returned to the studio, as the lights flare and the cameras roll, they're no longer the invincible women they were. They're fragments of a once proud family struggling to find a way to rise from the rubble. The studio is now just an empty shell, the lights extinguished, the echo of once resounding words reduced to a faint whisper in memory. The women of the View, once a family united by laughter and faith, stand amid the ruins of the home they built. Imagine this moment as an unfinished painting, the remaining strokes on the canvas, the fragments of the story we've witnessed. On one side is Karoline Leavitt, the young woman who entered the arena barehanded with a flame no one could quench. She stands there, unflinching, her gaze steady, as if declaring she won't back down, win or lose. On the other are the View's women, once invincible warriors, now bowing in a storm they didn't foresee. One of them, with silver hair and a voice that once boomed like thunder, might be staring into a mirror, wondering if all her years of fighting were worth it when the family she loved turned its back. The big sister, her anger still smoldering, might be pounding a wall somewhere, unwilling to let it end like this, and the youngest, with pensive eyes, might sit alone, replaying memories of the days they were a team, before it all shattered like glass beneath a heel. But this isn't a story with a neat ending, because life rarely hands us solutions wrapped in a pretty box. The View might find a way to rise, patching the cracks and pressing on, though with limping steps and scars that never heal. They could unite once more, turning this pain into strength, proving a family, however broken, can rise from ashes. Or they could collapse entirely, their legacy crumbling into pieces. A cautionary tale for those who think power is invincible. And Karoline Leavitt? She might win this, but whatever the outcome, one thing I know for sure, the truth, however painful or inconvenient, always finds a way to surface. Imagine that dramatic moment when the courtroom doors swing open, blinding light flooding in from outside, and Karoline's documents are laid on the table, each page a knife, slicing through the View and ABC's veneer. Words once spoken in laughter now ring out in silence, heavy as stones pressing on their chests. Truth doesn't care about fame or power, it cares only about being seen, heard, recognized. In this story, truth chose Karoline as its flag bearer, but it also forced the View's women to look in the mirror, facing themselves, not as opinion shapers, but as humans who erred, grew arrogant, and now must pay the price. And here's where the story becomes yours. Because it's not just about the View or Karoline Leavitt, but about all of us. Ask yourself, if you stood in that studio under those searing lights, what would you do? If you were one of those women, would you keep laughing, believing yourself untouchable, or would you bow, begging for a chance to make amends? If you were Karoline, would you forgive, offering a hand in peace, or fight to the end, no matter the cost? These aren't easy questions because they touch the moral lines we face daily, between pride and humility, loyalty and betrayal, laughter and tears. I don't have answers for you because life isn't a book with a final chapter written. It's a journey, and we each draw our own path. As the studio lights go dark, as the curtain falls on this tale, I leave you with an invitation, a call to reflect and share. What do you think of the View's women and Karoline Leavitt? Who do you see yourself in, the mocker or the one who stands? Tell me your thoughts, because each answer is a piece in the larger puzzle of who we are. And if this story makes you pause, even for a second, to look at yourself, then share it. Because in this world, truth always comes at a cost, and sometimes retelling the story is the only way to grasp what that cost truly is. As the last light fades, it's just you and me, with questions unanswered. Where do you stand in all of this?